The war between the United States of America and Iran has gone far beyond the Strait of Hormuz. Yemeni Houthis attacked 2 Saudi oil tankers in the Red Sea, and the price of oil immediately surged toward $100 per barrel. Trump, in response, threatened Iran with, I quote, devastating military punishment and stated that from now on he would hold Tehran responsible for everything the Houthis do. He said there's no point in striking Yemen for every Houthi attack. For each such attack, the US will strike Iran since the Houthis are their proxy forces. That same night, US aircraft struck Iran for the 12th, now the 13th night in a row. Qasem Island in the Strait of Hormuz was hit. At the same time, Donald Trump stated that he is considering a massive attack on Iran and is close to making such a decision. And meanwhile, Washington signed an agreement on nuclear energy with Saudi Arabia. The very same agreement that, according to American media, opens the way for Riyadh to enrich uranium, but after some time. And immediately set a condition. The deal will be finally approved only if the Saudis recognize Israel within the framework of the Abraham Accords. Let's go through everything together. Because, by the way, in this story, the price of oil directly affects, for example, how much money Russia will get for the war against Ukraine. In general, as they say, events in the Middle East concern both you and me. My name is Alexei Pecci. Let's discuss this whole topic together. Now let's break down everything that's happening in the Middle East. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're moving toward the 300,000 subscriber mark, so I would be grateful for your subscription. It only takes a second, and I would appreciate it. Let's review everything step by step. I'll start with what triggered the new round of war in the Middle East. Back on July 20, the military spokesman of the Houthi movement Ansar Allah, Yahya Sarria, announced the imposition of a naval blockade on Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea. The reason given was this: the years-long blockade of Yemen by the Saudis, restrictions on the operation of ports and airports. Although we know the real reason, it's an order from Tehran. The Houthis also stated at that time that they reserved the right to engage in, quote, comprehensive escalation and promised a harsh response to any provocation from Saudi Arabia. Just 3 days later, the Houthis moved from words to action. On the morning of July 23, the Houthis announced that during a military operation they attacked 2 Saudi oil tankers in the Red Sea. The government of Saudi Arabia confirmed the fact of the attack on the oil tanker Ancelia, but did not disclose who exactly carried out the strike. So they limited themselves to simply saying, yes, there was a strike, but that's it. A fire broke out on the vessel, but none of the crew were injured. Nevertheless, this was already a precedent that could not be left unanswered. As a result, Riyadh admitted that the actions of the Houthis put at risk the daily supply of 2.5 million barrels of Saudi oil, and the international market reacted instantly. The price of oil immediately jumped to $100 per barrel and even briefly exceeded that mark. To understand what this means, well, let's put it this way. To make it closer to us, the more expensive the oil, the more money Russia gets for every barrel of Russian oil sold, including the ones it sells through shadow schemes. So, the war in the Middle East directly fuels the budget from which missiles are then launched at Ukraine. This is an answer to everyone who writes in the comments saying, hey Pecci, you should talk more about Ukraine, why are you telling us about Iran, that's closer to home for us. No, it's all very closely interconnected. Geopolitics as a whole is a process where everything is as connected as possible. It's all interrelated. Donald Trump's reaction to the Houthis attack came the same day, July 23rd, and now I'll quote him. Let this statement serve as a warning. If they do this again, the US will hold Iran responsible since the Houthis are Iran's proxies, and serious military punishment will be applied to Iran and, of course, to the Houthis themselves. Later, Trump added an interesting detail. He expressed personal disappointment with the Houthis. I quote, They really disappointed me because until recently they acted professionally and reasonably. Well, Trump also pointed out that about a year ago, the US carried out very powerful strikes against the Houthis for attacking ships and obstructing commercial shipping. The key point here is the principle of collective responsibility, which Trump is now introducing. That is, Iran will be held responsible for any Houthi attack. This greatly expands the scope for escalation, because now any missile or drone launch from the Yemeni coast automatically becomes a reason for a strike on Tehran. Although it's worth acknowledging another important point regarding the threats made by the American president. Trump threatened to destroy one bridge or one power plant in Iran in response to each Iranian attack on ships in the Strait of Hormuz. But to put that in perspective, in Iran, there are hundreds of bridges, so it's not much of a threat, and by this logic, well, you could actually fight for years. For years, Iran would strike ships and the US would hit a bridge for every ship. Nevertheless, Iran has already been made to answer for the first Houthi attack. Late Thursday evening, early Friday morning, and then again overnight into Saturday, the American military launched a new series of airstrikes against Iran. According to reports from Iranian state media, over the past 2 nights, Keshem Island in the Hormuz Strait has been hit by missile strikes. This is a key point from which Iran controls the passage of ships. The Iranian state agency IRIP reported that 4 people were killed and 5 were injured in an American missile strike on the city of Avas. The US Central Command reported that it completed operations on September 12 and 13. Every night there are strikes on Iranian targets, and the official objective is stated as ensuring freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. And here a new detail has emerged in the Americans' tactics, because for strikes on Iran, the United States has started using B-1 bombers. For the week and a half before this, they weren't doing that. Iran responded according to its usual pattern. In particular, an attack on neighboring Arab countries where American bases are located. The Ministry of Defense of Kuwait reported repeated attacks by Iranian drones in the north of the country. Both Jordan and Kuwait have stated that the Iranians are also attacking them with missiles and drones in the same way. Against this backdrop, Britain has advised its citizens to refrain from any travel to Kuwait and Bahrain except for absolutely essential trips. Tehran's position at this stage was voiced by Mohsen Rezai. He is a senior military advisor to Iran's supreme leader, Majtabi Khamenei. He stated that attacks on Iran's infrastructure will be met with a harsh and escalating response. In short, the spiral of escalation continues to intensify. But it seems that Donald Trump is in fact preparing something bigger. In an interview with Axios, the American president stated that he is considering a massive attack on Iran and that he is close to making such a decision. He commented on Israel as follows: "The Israelis would join in 2 minutes if I asked them." But he immediately added that we don't need anyone to launch a new operation. So, in other words, the American president publicly announces that the decision to launch a major military operation against Iran is nearly final, and that if he wants to, he can involve Israel in it, but supposedly he can handle it without them. Meanwhile, resistance is rising in the United States. And the House of Representatives voted to end Trump's war in Iran without Congress's approval. But in fact, a little later, the Senate overturned the House of Representatives' decision. Well, formally, these resolutions do not have the force of law. But the vote highlighted the growing discontent with this war even among some Republicans. And now, the second major story out of the Middle East, which caused a separate scandal. The nuclear deal between the United States of America and Saudi Arabia made everyone nervous. Back on Wednesday, July 22, U.S. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright and Saudi Arabia's Minister of Energy Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman signed an agreement on civil nuclear cooperation. Basically, it's about the American company Westinghouse and other US companies getting contracts to build 2 nuclear reactors on Saudi territory. And in fact, this is just the beginning. So 2 reactors are just the start. But the scandal broke out because, according to the American press, the deal opens the door for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to enrich its own nuclear fuel in 2 years. The agreement provides for a 2-year techno-economic study of the part that concerns uranium enrichment. Congress is given 90 session days to review the deal before it comes into force. And so Trump responded to all the criticism, and his wording is as follows, quote, "The civil nuclear deal. There will be no enrichment of material. The agreement being made between the U.S. Department of Energy and Saudi Arabia, which concerns only non-military use, like what Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and others already have, will be approved, but it completely depends on Saudi Arabia joining the highly respected and successful Abraham Accords. The United States is not opposed to civilian, non-enriching nuclear facilities." White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed this condition for the nuclear agreement, and here is her quote. "Yes, this deal with Saudi Arabia, this energy deal depends on this condition, as far as the president is concerned. We will continue negotiations with our Saudi partners to finalize the deal and hopefully see them join the Abraham Accords soon." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a statement literally an hour after Trump's statement. He linked this to the war with Iran and stated that the joint war that Israel and the US started against Tehran has created an opportunity to expand peace in the Middle East. Here is his quote. As President Trump said, Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords would be a historic leap forward for peace in the Middle East. Peace through strength. But there is criticism of this deal both in the US and in Israel. And the criticism is quite serious. Senator Chris Murphy wrote, "This agreement will trigger a nuclear arms race in the region, further depriving Iran of incentives to limit its own nuclear program. Experts insist that the Saudis' persistent demand for enrichment in Saudi Arabia is exactly what stalled previous negotiations under successive US administrations. One after another, they still did not allow this uranium enrichment. Now, Donald Trump insists that there will be no enrichment. But according to the documents, there will be no uranium enrichment in Saudi Arabia as long as he remains president, that is, for another 2 years. And after that, the Saudis will get this opportunity under the next president. By the way, American President Donald Trump likes to set up such traps for the next president. Let me remind you that after his first term, at the end of his first presidential term, Trump signed an order to withdraw the American army from Afghanistan. And then Biden had to deal with all of that. And after that, Trump came and said, look how shamefully Biden withdrew the American army from Afghanistan. Although it was Donald Trump who started this process. And the contradiction here is obvious. The United States of America is waging war against Iran, including to make Tehran give up uranium enrichment for at least 2 decades and allow inspectors to go anywhere at all. And at the same time, the US opens the door to uranium enrichment for its ally, Saudi Arabia. There is another problem that makes the whole arrangement very shaky, so, as they say, nothing is set in stone yet. The Saudis made it clear that the answer is no. They will not normalize relations with Israel until a path to the creation of a Palestinian state is established. And the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, made it just as clear that there will simply be no path to the creation of a Palestinian state. What does all this mean? First, the war in the Middle East has expanded geographically. If the Hormuz Strait used to be the main front, the Red Sea has now become another front as well. And this is already a threat to 2 to 2.5 million barrels of Saudi oil per day, plus the entire route through the Suez Canal. Second, Trump introduced the principle by which Iran is held responsible for the actions of the Houthis. This means that any new attack in the Red Sea automatically gives grounds for a massive retaliatory strike. Third, and probably the most sensitive for us, oil above $100 per barrel. This is direct financial support for Russia. That is, every dollar increase in the price of a barrel due to the war in the Middle East means extra money for Russia's budget, which is then used to strike Ukrainian cities. So, despite how distant this front may seem from us, it still directly affects our war. Oil prices are rising, and there's also a shortage of air defense systems since Patriot missiles are being used up there right now. And the longer the Middle East burns, the more beneficial it is for Moscow. So let's wish for a quick end to the war. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, let me remind you that you can do so. Just make any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.